What's up guys, Ryan here at Signature Edits, and inside of this Lightroom tutorial we are taking a look at the massive new update that Lightroom came out with version 11. Now this update has radically changed the way that Lightroom masks work and the options you have when you're actually editing inside of Lightroom. So let's take a look. You're going to want to dive in as soon as possible and get your updated version of Lightroom so you can take advantages of these new features. We're going to see what's under the hood, how they work, show you what you're missing, and get you updated as soon as possible. You ready? Let's hit that intro. Okay, so I opened up Lightroom today to an amazing surprise, which was a brand new masking panel. Now, if you grab a few photos, head into the Develop module, and look up here where you normally have your brush, your radial filter, your graduated filter, you'll notice that your menu is a lot simpler all of a sudden. You've got the crop, you've got your, I think that's spot removal tool. Ooh, clone, heal, brush. Okay, perfect. So yeah, your spot removal tool as before, just with a different icon. And then we've got red eye fix, which who uses that in 2021? I don't know, but it's there. And then we have this little dot, which is now all of your masking options. Now, other than just hiding a few options inside of a little dot icon, we've got some new actual masks inside of Lightroom's newest update. So we've got a select subject mask and a select sky mask. And we've also got something called depth range. Now, if you've used Lightroom CC in the past, you've probably seen this before. Depth range is specifically for cameras, mainly cell phone cameras that have a depth feature in them. So what these cameras are doing now is they're taking multiple images and they're taking them all at different planes of focus. So you'll have this part in focus, then this part, then this part, then this part, and then they're stitching that together later in post to decide where you want to actually have your in focus spot be in the photo or to create more depth, right? So that's what that is for. If you're taking photos on a normal SLR camera, a mirrorless camera, that's going to be grayed out. That's why you can't access it right now. But what we're mainly looking at and celebrating, because this is massively amazing, is the new select subject and select sky features in Lightroom. So let me show you how this works. It's pretty simple. To add a new mask, we just click on what we want to do and we'll select the subject. Now, it's going to auto detect, and you can see that we've got an amazing mask and pretty darn friggin' accurate. Like, that's what's crazy about this. If you wanted to do this with automask before, wouldn't have worked at all. If you wanted to do this by just taking a brush and brushing along your subject, wouldn't have worked at all. Now you can see there's one little spot here that Lightroom kind of messed up, both on the water right here and missing a shoelace. So if we want to now, you've got this little mask panel here, and it's kind of like Photoshop in a way that you can see all of your masks on this little menu bar, and you can flip between them. No more of those little dots that you have to keep track of which mask is which, right? So what we have to do here is grab our mask that we just created, and we can actually add or subtract from that mask. So in this case, let's start by subtracting, because we want to get rid of this little bit of masking on the water that wasn't on our subject. So we're going to hit the brush, and then you can see I've got an eraser brush. I can scroll down a little bit and just erase the mask off this area. Bada bing, bada boom. So I can clean up this mask if I need to. At the same time, let's say we want to get that shoelace that wasn't masked out properly. We could do the same thing, hit add, go to our brush, and we can just brush that on there. Done. Okay, so now really quickly and easily, in about 2 seconds, Lightroom actually is allowing us to do these complex masks that would have taken a long time or been completely impossible before. So I can grab that mask, we can adjust the exposure up or down, do all sorts of things really quickly and simply. So here's before and here's after. I can do some amazing effects because now my mask is so flipping accurate. It's lovely. Let's go on to another photo, just show you how it works. So we're gonna grab the same thing, select subject. Lightroom's gonna think and be like, oh, there's the subject, we're perfect. Okay, let's see. And you can see how perfect that line is. Now, I've tested this on a few different photos so far, and I've been really amazingly impressed with how accurate it is, both in finding the subject in the scene and also getting a really, really nice mask. So we're just gonna brighten our subject up so we can darken our background down. Maybe raise our highlights up a little bit and our whites. The reason I'm gonna do that is because then I'm gonna lower the highlights here in this image and lower the whites a bit, maybe. So here's before. Hello. And of course, Lightroom freezes up. What can you do? And after. Okay, here's another JPEG image, and you can see if we go to our mask panel, we're going to do the same thing. Select subject, Lightroom is amazing. Now they're missing a small spot down here, so there's a few things we could do. We could go add and then grab our brush, or we could use any of our previous tools. We could add a gradient. Let's say we wanted to add a gradient to this mask from the window side of the photo. We could do that, or we could subtract a gradient, doing the same thing. Hello, let's just undo that. Subtract a gradient, just like that. Really, really cool being able to combine these different mask modes. And why would you want to do that? Well, let's say I want to mask out the subject, but I just really want to brighten the shadow part of her. Well, I would do that auto mask to grab the entire subject. And then I take my gradient from the window side, which is the bright side out of the photo. And I can raise the exposure, and it's going to raise it more on the shadow side than on the bright side. So that's super, super handy. If we want to, of course, we can also use these other guys. The color range and luminance range are exactly the same as the luminance masks you used to have. So let's grab our new color range. It's going to give us this eyedropper tool. If we want to add a few different points, just hold down Shift, and Lightroom will sample from all those different points. We can do the same thing with our luminance range. If you've used a range mask before, you're going to understand how this works, but they've kind of made the actual panel here a little bit easier to understand what's going on, where specifically that range is, and how wide of a kind of feather is being applied with the range. So you can see that this is kind of the top end of the range mask, and it's feathering off to around here. So it's feathering off to around 81%. Now it's feathering up to 100. Now it has a 0 feather. So hopefully that makes sense, and it's super handy to be a little bit more nuanced with those tools. So let's delete that out of there. What else can we do? We can grab a radial gradient, do the exact same thing. We can either add it to our mask or subtract it from our mask, or we can just create a brand new mask by going up here to create mask. Select whatever you need. We'll do our plain old brush over here in the corner. You can see we've actually got a green overlay here. That's not by default. I went and switched that because now in this little show overlay panel, we actually have the option to set that to whatever color we want, which is super, super handy. If you've got a photo that already has a lot of pink, the pink overlay might be a little bit unhelpful, so you might set it to green. Or if you have a very green photo, you might set it to yellow or something that just pops a little bit better. Or something you find aesthetically more pleasing. So that's pretty cool, and it'll even save your custom colors, which is pretty awesome. And the overlay can show the affected area or the unaffected area. So that's something different. We have better tools to actually show us those overlays. Okay, let's keep going just to see what else we got and how well this is working. And honestly, at first I was a little bit confused when I was doing this. I was like, okay, so I want to select my subject. That's pretty straightforward, but like keeping track of all these masks up here, at first you have to get used to a new menu. But if you want to, you can actually drag it in here, and then all of your masks are going to be kind of in the same sidebar that you were used to before. Or of course, you can have it as a standalone window wherever you want, which is really, really cool that now we can actually move this mask window and kind of put it somewhere that's convenient for you. So I'm going to keep it kind of up where it was before. We've selected our subject, which is great. You can see I can make myself completely dark. And it's amazing how effective this mask is. Like, it is so pristine that I can get away with pushing things so much farther in Lightroom than I ever could before. So let's just delete this for a second. We're going to select our subject again. And really, I just want to make myself brighter so the background pops a little bit more, or has a little bit more contrast by comparison. So I'm going to make myself brighter and bring the contrast down, and the whites down, and the highlights down, and even the clarity down a little bit. Now what that's going to let me do is I can do the opposite now with my background. So there's two ways of grabbing the background, right? I could either apply that change to everything globally, or I could go in here, grab this mask, go duplicate mask. And just like that, we've got another copy of that same mask. We can even name it whatever we want. So we'll call this the background. And we'll call this Ryan. And now what's really cool is I can keep track of my masks so much better because I actually have them labeled. This is amazing. So I'm going to grab my background mask, and I'm just going to invert everything I did here. So I'm going to add some contrast. I'm going to add some highlights, lower some shadows, raise some whites, lower some blacks, add some texture. Okay, now the only problem is right now this mask is actually still on me. So how do I invert it? Well, you have to hit these three little dots. You're going to notice that we have an intersect mask width, which doesn't help us. We don't have any invert. Now the invert, you actually have to go down to these three little dots here. And hello. There we go. You have to click the mask to expand it. I knew it was in here somewhere. Go down to where it says subject, then hit those 3 little dots and go with invert. Now, hopefully Lightroom actually changes this later because it's really confusing that you can't just select the top layer and find the invert tool. But just know that if you're trying to invert a mask, you can grab it by going down to subject or whatever that mask sublayer is and hit invert. That's how you invert the mask. Or, of course, you could hit the apostrophe key or the quotation key on your keyboard and it'll do the exact same thing without having to skip that step. Okay, so that obviously looks like trash, but it's just amazing how effective we can be, right? So let's just get carried away. Let's try and make everything obscenely dark. Now, this just plain wasn't possible in in Lightroom before. Does this look supernatural and super pristine and perfect? No, the mask isn't like absolutely perfect, but it's pretty darn good. Like the fact that I went from this to this blows my flipping mind that I'm still in Lightroom. Now, of course, what we could do is go back to our Ryan mask. We're going to just reset this by holding Alt, and you're going to see I can hit reset, add a little contrast. I'm going to try and make me blend in with this black background a little bit. Add a little texture, a little clarity. There we go. Now let's try the exact opposite. Let's make the background white. So we're going to grab our exposure all the way up, highlights up, shadows up, put everything to 100. And you're going to see we're probably not going to get as far as we need it to be until we take our dehaze down. And then, Ryan, on an infinity background, I can cut myself off. I'll print this. I'll cut myself out. I'll put it on a popsicle stick, and I can have a little puppet. It's perfect. Thank you, Lightroom. Okay, let's move forward a little bit. Just keep playing, understanding these new tools a little better. We're going to select the subject. You're going to see a bit of a pattern here. Select the subject. We've got a nice subject mask. We'll call this Subject by Ryan. It's very artsy. Take the exposure up a little bit, take the contrast down, and I actually like kind of getting rid of some of the contrast on my subject because then what I can do is go into my main effects on everything and basically just exaggerate it, add some contrast, add some texture and clarity, and it's not going to overwhelm the subject. So there's a little trick for you to give it a try. Now I'm going to grab the background. We'll do the same thing. So we're going to go add a new mask, grab a subject mask, and this time, we're going to call that background. We'll invert it by pressing the apostrophe key on our keyboard. And then we can maybe add a little color. Take the white balance down. Add some saturation. Maybe change the hue a little bit. Take those shadows up. Depends what you're going for, right? But maybe even add a little bit of a color tint. Somewhere around there. I don't know. Did I take it too far? Yes, but here's before and here's after. So really, really quickly and simply, we can grab our different layers in the image and it's so good. Okay, let's go create mask. This time, let's select the sky here. It's going to detect the sky, and you can see we've got a little icon here to show which layer is being selected and what kind of layer it is. So these layers have a little man. This layer has a little photo like this guy. If you press O, you can see your overlay most of the time. Or in this case, you can't because the overlay is set to black. So let's just change that. And you can see right now the sky, for whatever reason, we've got the mask showing on the outside. That's because previously in my mask settings, I had it inverted. So let's just select this. We're going to go to overlay shows affected area. Now we've got our overlay on the sky. And we can grab our sky, maybe make it a little more blue. Grab our highlights and our contrast down. Shadows. Don't want to get too carried away here, but okay. Here's before and here's after. Nice. I am so stoked on this. If you want to play around with these same images, I'll upload a couple of them to signatureedits.com. So go there, signatureedits.com/free-raw-files, and you can edit a few of these. Practice along if you like. Okay, so this one, let's try and do something really extreme here just to see what Lightroom is capable of. I'm going to start by doing a subject mask, because that just makes sense. Press O so I don't have to see that overlay. Let's brighten our subject up. And then we're just going to soften things down on her. So we'll take the texture down, clarity down a little bit. Dehaze down a little bit. Just smooth things out. So here's without that, and here's with. Pretty massive difference. Okay, now let's do another mask and do the same thing. We'll do maybe select the sky this time. we got our sky right here. Let's do a really dark, brooding sky. Good, somewhere around that. Okay, and one more mask, and we'll do select the subject again. But this time I'm going to open that mask up. Remember, we have to expand it if we want to invert it. Hit these three dots and go Invert Mask. Now we got just the background. And we'll maybe darken the entire background. Probably make it brighter, but let's add some clarity. A little bit of dehaze. A little saturation. And then let's just add some contrasting color to it so our subject really is separated from the background. Something like that. So in just a few clicks, we're able to go from here to here. Pretty massive difference. And if we want to adjust things, we decided we've gone too far with our subject. We want it to be a little darker. Easy. Just like that. Before, after. So whether you're trying to do a really subtle edit or you're trying to do something really extreme, wow. It's amazing what you can do with the new masks here because they're so accurate. They're so perfect. Okay, let's try a couple more. We'll go select subject. And Lightroom knows, even on a really, really dark, busy background. So we'll brighten things up here so she pops. Perfect. Do another layer. New mask. Select sky this time. And our sky's looking a little bit busy. So we're just going to hit contrast down, texture, clarity, and dehaze down, just to smooth things out. Because I think there's already too much texture going on because this was taken with a cell phone. And so the photo's just really, really busy. Something like that. Okay. And now I'm going to hit add here, grab my brush, and the top of the mountain, I'm just going to try fading that in there. Now, that's obviously way too far. So what else could we do? Well, we could undo that by hitting Command-Z or Control-Z on a PC. And then, instead of manually doing it with a brush, what if we were to do it with a graduated filter? So we're going to go down here, and just like that, I can add a gradient. So it's kind of a mix of a gradient and our sky replacement tool, just so our sky and our mountains here get blended a little bit more naturally. Good. I think it maybe darken things down too a little bit. Okay. And then last of all, let's just do a standard radial filter. So we'll go create new mask, Radial Gradient. I'm going to place it around our subject. And you can see what's really cool about this new mask tool. If you don't have any settings by default on your effects, Lightroom is just going to automatically show you the overlay. So that's really handy because then I know exactly where my effect is taking place. And if you want to get rid of it, just apply any effect and Lightroom will then hide the overlay until you hit O again. Okay, good. I'm going to raise the shadows up a little bit, bring the texture down and the clarity and the dehaze down just a bit. So I'm taking the exposure down and the highlights up. The reason I'm doing that is I'm trying to darken everything, but the highlights I want to stay a little bit brighter than everything else. So I don't want it to seem like everything's getting darkened, and that'll just make it a little bit more transparent as an effect. So here's before, here's after. So I'm just kind of blending everything, making it a little bit less sharp. Somewhere around there. Okay, so here's before. And here's after. A million different things we could still do, but we're going to leave it for now because we got one last photo of yours truly. Oh man, I look so concerned in this photo. Anyways, so we're going to grab our new mask. We're going to go select subject. At this point, it's old news, right? But look at that. Look how accurate that mask is, and I love how it even feathers it. It's just unbelievable how good it is. It's better than the object selection tool was in Photoshop. So we've got our mask here, And it looks a little silly to start off with because this was taken on an iPhone, and so it's in like HDR mode. So what I'm going to do here is just darken things down a little bit, add some clarity, a little bit of texture, and some dehaze. Maybe get rid of the clarity or the texture. One of those isn't working. One of those doesn't feel right. Okay, somewhere around there. That feels a lot closer. So here's before and here's after. So easy. Now, if you wanted, let's say that the jacket feels a little dark, the face is about right. Okay, let's do the same thing. We'll just take this mask, we'll duplicate it, press O so we can see what we're doing, and now we're going to go subtract, and we'll go subtract with a brush and get rid of the jacket. Easy peasy. Now, another way to do that would actually be go subtract and subtract color range, and then we could just dab on the jacket, and Lightroom will do it automatically. Okay, so now we got our jacket layer, which we can make a little bit brighter, let's say, or just make the face brighter, your choice, because I grabbed the wrong one. And we don't have to confuse it anymore, because now we can go face and subject. And you can see what's really cool is that in the actual layers panel here, there's a preview of the shape of the mask. So in this case, I can tell this one is the full subject and this one's just the face, because the mask is just this little white dot in here. And we could take this, duplicate that layer, and turn this into a jacket layer by inverting it. So we'll select the layer, press the apostrophe key, and of course it's not going to work because we actually erased that part of the layer. So if you actually wanted to do this properly, we're going to delete that mask, duplicate our subject mask again, and this time we're just going to erase the face part of our mask. Okay, so now we got a jacket mask. We can warm this up, maybe add a little saturation, increase the highlights and the whites. One thing that people often underestimate is just how much you can do with just the temperature controls in the brush effect. So here's before, not super helpful, and here's after, right? And we could even add a color overlay if you want. So let's go extreme here. Really make that jacket pop. Okay, good. And lastly, let's grab a mask of the sky. Create new mask, select sky. You can see it did a great job. We're going to add some blue. And to make the sky pop, we're going to just raise the highlights a little bit. Whites we can raise up a little, maybe. Then drop the shadows. Drop the blacks. You're going to see we have a much more vivid sky now. And of course, we can maybe add a little dehaze. I'm going to actually take the texture down and the clarity down a little bit just to soften things slightly. Okay, so here's without, here's with, here's our before, here's our after, and we could continue to tweak this by selecting whatever layers we want to work on, whether that's just brightening up the face a little bit, or continuing to tweak this jacket. Let's grab our jacket here, and this time, what if we actually went the other way and we take our saturation all the way down? And that's going to show that our mask isn't perfect. That's because I erased it and didn't do the most beautiful job. So let's just go with a color range. We'll dab on right here. Good. So Lightroom's grabbing the rest of that color, and right there. Let's try this again. Hold down Shift to add another color point. There we go. And let's try one more. Nope, too much. Okay, so now we've desaturated it, so we could change the overall color of the jacket to whatever you want. So let's go with more of like a teal. And this is where you're going to see that my mask isn't perfect, so it's bleeding onto the face a little bit. So we're going to have to erase it off of there. So we'll subtract from a color range and just dab on here. You're going to see that doesn't work. Okay. So you're just going to have to find the best kind of combination for your specific photo. So in this case, the color range subtraction doesn't work. So I'm just going to subtract with a brush and erase off of the face here. Make sure I get my mask very clean, not bleeding anywhere else. And that's pretty much it. So here's before and here's after. Pretty wild change that we've made. Okay, so I hope at this point you can see just how big of a change this is inside of Lightroom. Being able to auto mask your subject, being able to mask out the sky, and being able to combine masks is an absolutely amazing step forward into never having to use Photoshop again, which is my personal goal when it comes to editing photos. I'm just not a Photoshop guy. So one last thing that you might be wondering, as we're going through here and we've got our masks and we can add or we can subtract, you might have noticed that we have down here, there's 3 little dots. We've got an intersect mask width. You can see we've got this color range, blah, 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 blah. So we're going to go select subject. You're going to see that not much really is happening. Now, what does it mean when you say intersect this mask with whatever? It just means that we're combining 2 different masks together, and only what is within those 2 masks is going to actually be affected. So remember earlier when we had our subject mask? So let's do one more. I'm going to create a new mask. I'm going to create a subject mask. It's going to find our subject. And then we took a graduated filter. So we went add or subtract. So in this case, subtract. And we grabbed a graduated filter, dragged it off to the side. And so that way we're affecting this side of the image more than this one, but only within this subject. That's because we've intersected the graduated filter with the subject mask. That's what's going on here. You can see they're intersected because they're both under this same larger mask. So we've got our mask at the top. And then we've got our sub-masks, intersected masks within that mask. I said mask a lot, so hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, if you're wondering about that, we kind of covered it already. It's just you might not have known it. When you're hitting add or subtract, you're intersecting the mask. That's what it's called. A little confusing, but easy enough once you know how it works. So I hope this video was helpful and you're seeing how powerful it is and you're excited to go ahead, download that new version of Lightroom and play for yourself. I'm going to post a couple of these photos to signatureedits.com so you can practice for yourself if you want. There's going to be free presets in the link below. And if you like this video, can you do me a big favor? Can you hit that like button, subscribe for more great content, tutorials, resources, you name it, and leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. How are you planning on using these new tools? All right, I'm going to get back to editing. In the meantime, create something awesome. See you in the next video. Peace.